Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, having a great day today. It's so great to see you again.
Thank you so much. Same here. Are you riding your bicycle or have you been avoiding the rain?
I'm riding my bicycle. I rode it. It's out there right now. Um, the night before last, you might recall we had a really big thunderstorm
Yeah.
the day before yesterday. And the night before last, I waited for it to go away. It didn't go away, but there was a light rain. And And I rode that bicycle all the way home in the middle of this light rain. And it was one of the most refreshing things.
Wow.
It was just, it was this mist just coming across you. And it's times like that when you find these special things about the weather
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
you realize it's your senses are just different.
Yeah.
They come alive.
Absolutely. It's nothing like rain. I mean, we don't like it because it kind of impacts our day, but to hear the rain falling when you're about to go to sleep or, when you're sitting there reading or something, it's so peaceful. The rain does such good things to us and revives us in ways that we don't always expect.
Well,
So
both my grandparents lived in houses with tin roofs.
absolutely nothing like a tin roof in rain.
That's
Woo,
right.
that's the best. So will you please tell us your name?
Bill Brown.
Bill Brown. And Bill, will you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am the executive chair of Eight Rivers Capital. I'm also the chief technology officer here and one of the co-founders. I grew up in the mountains of Waynesville, North Carolina, about 17 miles away from the Tennessee border, 1 mile away from the Blue Ridge Parkway. Up in the hills, I was pretty isolated where I grew up, but grew up in a community with lots of people who were loving and caring. And when I walked down the street, everyone there was my mother and father.
Yeah. One of those community people groups that raises all the kids in the neighborhood.
That's right.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. So I know a lot about you, but I want my listeners to learn. So you are an MIT graduate.
That's right.
You are a Wall Street guru.
Well, I was a Wall Street guy, so
Wall Street guru, that's right. And can you tell us a little bit about those two experiences? So why did you choose to go to MIT?
well, as I said, I grew up in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was a wonderful, wonderful environment. Um, I it, was- I was in the sixth grade, and for some reason I saw this movie on TV, and right before dinner, and I go into dinner, and I announced to my parents that I was going to become a nuclear physicist. Don't ask me why. I don't remember what movie it was that I saw, but I was going to become a nuclear physicist. And I asked my father, I said, so how do you do that? He says, well, you've got to go to a good school. And I said, well, like where? And he said, well, school like MIT. And I said, well, tell me about it. Well, that's the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And I said, well, that's where I'm going to go. And dad sort of, well, Bill, that's a really hard school to get into. And so he was trying to adjust my ambitions and expectations. But that day I decided that's where I was going to go. And the fact that he said it was hard to get into meant I was doubling up on my efforts to go there. Um, when it got to the point of my applying, my senior year, my parents had no idea where I was applying. And I sent off, got applications to and I don't know why I chose these schools, but I got applications to Harvard, Yale, Penn, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, and that was it. And when I submitted my applications, I submitted them to Johns Hopkins and MIT. And also, I think my guidance counselor said you need some other school. So I threw in University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I got into all three schools, and I remember saying to my father, Dad, I can go to UNC and I'll save a lot of money. If I go to UNC, can I have a car? And he says, no, you go to wherever you go. There's no car in this deal. I'm not doing a deal to give you a car. And so I chose to go to MIT, and it wasn't a choice to leave Waynesville as much as it was simply a choice to go to MIT.
That's beautiful. But isn't it amazing how the universe works, right? Because if you would have gotten the car, you'd have been at Chapel Hill, but you went to MIT and you got so much more. And the universe is always conspiring for us. I like that. So, okay, so MIT, and then did you leave MIT when you graduated and start on Wall Street, or did you have some other paths along the way?
Well, my MIT path was sort of a strange path. When I was admitted to Johns Hopkins, I went up to Hopkins, had this weekend where you come up to see Hopkins, and it happens to be Hopkins is a big lacrosse school. And I remember going there and seeing all this partying going on, all this lacrosse stuff and this athletic stuff. And I thought to myself, oh, who wants to go to school with all this distraction? I want to go where you can be serious. And so that's the reason I chose MIT over Hopkins, because at that time I was sort of thinking about going to medical school. And I went to MIT. The goal of MIT was I'll only have to do math and science and nothing else. And I got to MIT, and MIT has this wonderful system of in the humanities, they require you to take one humanities course every semester for 8 semesters. They require you to take inside that humanities course, you need to have some level of concentration on something. And then you have to have, and then in the sciences, you had to have your major, and then you had to have what they call distribution, where you had to have courses outside your major. And so originally, I was really smart math and science, and I took a couple of courses my freshman year, and one of them was called Modernization of Societies. It was sort of a classic military industrial complex, this history of technology and the like, and industrialization of societies. And you have to keep in mind, this was right at the end of the Vietnam War. I mean, this was in 1973. I actually had a draft number, and in the 300s. So that was, a good draft number. And the other course I took was the history of political philosophy. And I had no idea that any of this stuff existed. So my industrialization of societies course, we were reading Pentagon Papers, we read, Sloan's My Life with General Motors, and a bunch of these. And it was all about how this world grew up that I was getting ready to enter into, this sort of industrial world. And then the history of political thought was also interesting. It was all about, well, why are governments and people, why did they get together the way they do? But my major that I was declaring was bioelectrical engineering. So I was basically getting a biology degree and a double E degree. And I wanted to really focus on this math and science thing. Second year, I would so enjoyed these other courses I took. Modernization of society and like industrialization and political philosophy. And so I started taking all sorts of other courses.
In the humanities realm.
Right, in the humanities. And then I sort of declared, well, I can't do both double E and bio because it really will limit my flexibility because it gives me too many courses I need to, take. So I ended up focusing on biology and then figured, focused on biology, and then started taking all these other courses. So I at one point had an aspiration to take a foundational course in every department of MIT.
Wow.
Now, I didn't make it. I made it through about 2/3 of them, but I needed to take a foundational course in urban planning, or a foundation course in astrophysics, or a foundation course in, I took a lot of chemistry, a lot of physics, a lot of math, a lot of biology, a lot of econ, a lot of political science, chemical engineering, um, and and I was ending up taking overloads. And by the time I sort of got to the end of MIT, I realized I had enough units for 2 degrees. And my next decision was not to go. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I originally thought I wanted to be a doctor, but I was too busy sort of learning about a broader education. And so in retrospect, knowing what I know now, I really would have enjoyed an Oxford PPE approach, politics, philosophy, economics, which is more of a sort of a balanced curriculum.
Yeah.
But and I know all the math and science courses were really easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it was just easy.
Came natural to you.
Yeah, it was just, and the thing that was hard for me was writing. And so my father was a lawyer back in the mountains of North Carolina. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go to law school and maybe I'll go home and practice law with him, but at least I'll learn how to write better. Mm-hmm. So my going to law school was, sort of the reason a lot of people go to law school is they don't know what else to do. Mm-hmm. And that was true for me. But at least I had my father pull, and then I had this educational pull, needing to learn how to write. Mm-hmm. And so I applied directly to law school and came to Duke. And my thought is, Dad practiced law up in the mountains of North Carolina. I go to Duke, and then that would be where I would go. And I worked for him the summer before law school, and I did property title searches in the mountains for him. Mm-hmm. And I stood there in the Register of Deeds office and did these property title searches. And I realized working for my father for the rest of my life was, as much as I admire him, and he's, an honorable, honest person that everyone knew and liked, it was not going to be my future. Yeah. I worked the first summer for a law firm in Washington, D.C. that was a boutique law firm that was run by Clark Clifford. Mm-hmm. Clark Clifford was, advisor to all the Democratic presidents. Clark was the Secretary of Defense during one part of the Vietnam War. I mean, that was just an amazing job to get. Yeah. And second summer, I worked in Los Angeles, and knew that was not probably going to be the thing for me. And I was sitting in the Duke Law Library, and this is the funniest thing happened. And this happened. A guy walks up to me and says, "What are you doing for lunch?" And he, had a coat and tie on, and I joined him for lunch. His name was Reg Kaler, and he was with Donovan, Leisure, Newton, and Irvine in New York City. And he says, "Why don't you come to New York City and practice law with us?" I didn't know him from anything. He picked me out of a crowd in the library, and so I went to work at Donovan,
Wow.
and I was one of these. You probably get a sense. A lot of people today see me and think that I've never met a stranger, and they think that I'm sort of a very much of an extrovert. But I was a real introvert. I was very much to myself, and I was very studious, and I so when I went to work at in New York, and Donovan, by the way, was one of the biggest antitrust law firms in the world then, and I wanted to do antitrust, and then because they had some scandal around the Kodak antitrust case, I realized that their antitrust practice was going to suffer for a while, so I decided to move over into corporate law.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all these things are little things. I mean, here I am reacting to them. I chose them for antitrust, but knew that their antitrust thing was failing at, but I didn't get, I never fell in love with that because I knew that my career was not going to be a career in a department that was imploding.
Right.
And so I needed to be agile on my feet and move to something else. Because if I really wanted to do corporate work, Donovan was not the place to go for corporate.
Right.
It was really more litigation and antitrust. So, and I did that. I was this guy that wrote all these memos for the head of the securities law department. He asked me a question, I'd write him a 20-page memo a few times, a 70-page memo a few times, footnotes and everything. And this other lawyer partner in the firm used to refer to me as, he says, "Bill, go back to the library with your skull and candle." and and so I had this reputation for just doing all-nighters and just doing this very studious sort of stuff, and then I finally started doing deals. But Donovan was the first instance, and I think there are a few, you're trying to sort of get some guidance here for other people in their lives, and it was the first instance of where I was recruited for something I wasn't expecting.
And you're open to that.
And every other job after that, same thing happened.
Yeah. Until
2008. Every single job recruited me. I was not looking for a job. It didn't happen. They came after me, and I pick up the phone and I say, "I'm not interested." And of course, that just makes them want you more.
Yeah, absolutely.
But leaving Wall Street in 2008 was the first time that I decided to leave something. Although, guess who recruited me then? It was actually David Levy. He called me up and he said, "Oh, Bill, you can do this venture capital stuff anywhere. Why don't you come down here and teach?"
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing about it, first, I want to say, I still would consider you an introvert, not an extrovert. I think that you know how to do the thing when you're in the right space, you bring the right build to the situation. I think that's always been my experience of you, but I still think you're a bit of an introvert. But so you come to North Carolina. Dean Levy has recruited you to Duke. Come back to your home, come back to where you went to law school. So you have a lot to offer and you have a lot of experience to share with the students. So you're at Duke and you are doing amazing things, and things are going well. And then one day, and I want to remind you something you said to me. I think you might have said this to me like in 2010 or something like that. You said, the smartest thing you can do is find something where you work and fix it. Do you remember telling me that?
No.
Yeah, but I thought it was a very amazing thing. So there you were at Duke already doing all the things. And I guess you must have found things that needed to be fixed because you fixed a lot while you were at Duke. So one of the things I remember with the gates throughout law school. So there's that. Do you want to say a little bit about the gates and how you came up with that idea?
Yeah, we had this, the gates had at that point swipe cards where you had to swipe into and swipe out of. And you have to keep in mind, I used to, working on Wall Street, I would think of everything as what is the most efficient use of an asset. If you take if you put some things into a box, it doesn't all fit. It might not all fit in the box, but if you shake it a little bit, it'll settle down and fit.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens with parking. And so I had this thought that, maybe we're parking, and I looked down my hall. I was Duke is a place where professors, if they came in, a lot of professors don't come in unless they teach.
Right.
And they tend to work from home. Some professors do come in when they teach. Well, they all have to come in when they teach. And then some of them come in all the time. And I looked at the law school parking lot and I thought, the problem with this parking lot, and I could see it down my faculty hall, is the Monday, Wednesday professors and the Tuesday, Thursday professors should be parking in the same parking lot. And I thought, there's a whole theory to how you stack it. It's sort of like the box, how do you stack the box with stuff and be more efficient how you put it in there. And so I went to Tallman Trask at the university, and he ran and said, Tallman, let me do an experiment on the law lot, and we'll talk about how we can enhance the experience of parking. And Dean Levy was behind it. He supported it. And we put some equipment there. And the vision behind it, we never were able to execute the entire vision for it. Because I do think that when the school finally, the university finally looked at what we did at the law school, and then put an RFQ out for the entire world to do. And we responded to that RFQ, but we lost the bid. Mm-hmm. And the reason we lost the bid is they went with someone who was familiar and had the experience, and not with us. And so this was one of our first chances to get a big deal, but we're dealing with an institution that wanted to make sure that they were worried about their jobs more than our technology, which is part of life. It should be that way, but I wish they'd given us a chance, because we had someone who had a LAS parking would have backed all of us with full warranties and wraps on everything that we did. And but what we would have done with this is the school just had a new coffee bar and lunch place called the Refectory, and I was going to start extending this to where when you came into the law lot, automatically, if it was before 10 a.m., your order for coffee went in and it was waiting for you. And I was trying to figure out how we turn parking into much more of an experience. Or when there are times when the law school wasn't operational, why not sell the parking spaces to someone who can swipe in? We were really trying to think through, how do you take this asset and make a lot more money off of it? And I still don't see parking done right anywhere. Yeah. And I just think it's a lost opportunity, but we had a lot of fun and trying it out and dreaming about it. And in fact, our technology is actually here at American Tobacco.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really phenomenal about that, again, going back to this, is so you were there as a law professor, you had other responsibilities, but this wasn't in your job description to, come up with a better solution to parking. But I think it speaks to how you see effectiveness and how to improve effectiveness. And I think you're always thinking of that in your work. So that leads me to my next question. So you're at Duke, you're doing all these great things, and then one day, in your infinite wisdom, you come up with this new company. And I remember the first time I heard you talk about it, it was actually pretty profound to hear that you were thinking about this. And it kind of didn't mesh with what I knew about you. So, like, okay, here we're going from law to finance. How did we get over here to the environment? How did that happen? What was the shift? But I think then it goes back to everything I always think about you. You know, you're always thinking. You're not just settling or accepting what you see for what it is. So you created Eight Rivers.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about Eight Rivers.
Eight Rivers, we initially founded two companies. One was we call one thing, but the other was Eight Rivers, but those got merged together. But the whole idea behind what we created was that we would invent new technologies to solve some of the big problems of the world. And in some respects, that sounds like any company. You know, you should all figure out what problems exist out there and go try to solve them. We didn't know where we were going. And it was driven more by my desire to get back to my technical roots, my MIT roots, and to combine it with my Wall Street experience. And so the thought was we would invent new things and we would commercialize them. You know, there's a guy that was on the board of the law school, and he's around in the community. His name is Lanty Smith. And Lanty used to say to me, because Eight Rivers was thinking about different projects, different technologies. He said, you've got to have your first success before you can have your second. In other words, you should focus. And I thought to myself, well, maybe. And what I did do is we focused on one technology called the Allen-Fetvet cycle, which was embedded in a company called Net Power. But our original version of this was in 2009. We saw something in the budget, the federal budget that Obama passed, the Recovery Act, and it was for clean coal. And so at this time we were doing something in algae to fuels. We were doing something in a group of students here were working on a job app. We were doing this. We decided to do clean coal, and we had some cardiac device thing that came and went pretty quickly once I figured out that we were not analyzing it deeply. And our original thing was we had one of the engineers here came up with this idea of how to do clean coal. Well, the fact is the idea that he came up with had already been done before. And I've always found that a lot of people think what they discover on their own is because they discovered it, it doesn't mean that someone else hasn't discovered it already. There's a lot of people a lot of really smart people discover things. It's like my brother one time, I walked in the door and he was playing something on the piano. He says, Bill, listen to what I've composed. And I said, Robert, that's Moonlight Sonata inverting the arpeggios. So he basically was taking these chord progressions, and instead of going up, he was just going down, and he was inverting them. And I mean, in his head, he thought he invented something new, and he did. But I heard it, and so but that's just sort of Moonlight Sonata upside down. So, and so the technology the clean coal technology that was in effect the Moonlight Sonata upside down, I was getting ready to throw it away. I don't fall in love with anything. And that's the big thing I learned on Wall Street. Just don't fall in love with stuff. It's like one time my boss asked me about a trade. He says, in fact, I said on one day, buy particular asset, and it fell that night. And it came to me and says, so Bill, if you liked it yesterday, you must love it today because it just got cheaper. But I was underwater.
Right.
And what he was trying to do is he was trying to figure out, do I still like it? Or did I think that because of the price movement, I made a mistake? And so his session with me turns into, well, how much do you like it? Do you still like it? And when I still liked it, he says, okay, buy some more. But if he could shake my confidence in my trade, you'd say sell it. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of life is about having those conversations with yourself and figuring, because too often we buy something or we take something or we use something and we think we've got to like it because we made that first decision. But the moment it stops working for you, you should get rid of it.
Exactly.
The one thing that, for instance, whenever people, one of the things I tell people about stock is, they said, people say, oh, I own this and I wish I had gotten out of it. Listen, you should think of every stock that you own, that you buy it every day.
Yep, you buy it.
So if you don't, would you buy it today? Well, no, then you should get out of it.
Yeah.
But it takes that sort of analysis. So we'd put together this clean coal thing, and clearly was a dog, and I was ready to get rid of it. And my colleague, basically, I could tell that he was hurt because he'd sort of fallen in love with it. And I said, okay, fine, we'll find someone to work with you. And I thought through, what did he not have? And we needed to go find somebody who, this guy did not have chemical engineering skills, but he had chemistry skills. So he had, had some of it, but not the practical piece, or not the, and so and we interviewed a lot of people, including this one guy in the UK, Rodney Allen. And Rodney sounded too good to be true. And so we moved on. But finally, after all this group of people I talked to, because I knew that we needed to have somebody who could work side by side on this sort of a technology. And the only reason I wasn't going to I was killing the technology, but I wasn't going to kill the general market, because the total addressable market was really, really good. It's a big market. And so I went back to Rodney. I flew over to London and saw Rodney and talked to him for 4 hours in Morgan Stanley's offices over there. And I realized he was the guy. And to go back here is that we decided, because so much money had been put in the Recovery Act, that clean coal was important. Mm-hmm. We had done our market analysis. We sort of learned about what the price of clean needed to be and what the cost needed to be. And the irony of ironies, by the way, we went in and showed this to Peabody Coal in St. Louis, and they, as I predicted, trashed it because it was too expensive. Mm-hmm. And people the way they trashed it 10 years before, when someone else had come up with it. But our thought was the right thing. We were in the right hymn book. We were just singing the wrong hymn. Mm-hmm. And then when we found Rodney, we were able to synthesize something together that was truly revolutionary. And that then took 10 years for us to develop. We had to raise, in 2012, we raised 50 million into it. Then in 2014, we raised another 100 million into it. Then in 2016, put another 20 into it. And then 2018, put another little under 100 million into it. And all along, it took 10 years to take that to the point where we can now commercialize
And
it. And
and it's there now. You commercialize it, and
we're commercializing it now. We're building. We've got $2.8 billion worth of projects announced, and one in the UK, one in Illinois, one in Colorado. But 5 years ago, in the middle of developing this, I then did a major course change on 8 Rivers. We sort of dropped by the wayside the algae stuff. We were doing communication technology and space launch technology. We dropped those by the way. And we started getting to Lanty's vision that you can't have your second success without your first. But then I realized that the world was in a world of hurt for climate.
yeah, absolutely.
And that that we were facing what I will call a SearsIBM moment. In 1990, Sears was the biggest, baddest mail order retailer on the planet.
Yeah.
IBM was the biggest computer company on the planet. I wouldn't say it was necessarily the best, but certainly the biggest.
Right.
Those two firms were thinking about their future. But Sears, they were getting scared by the Walmarts and the other big box stores. And so, they had some, they'd attached their stores to various malls, shopping malls. And so they thought that was the version. Their big box stores were not sort of standing alone. They were attached to malls. And so Sears was looking at Walmart and Home Depot and those things and thought, we've got to worry about that. And they thought their mail order business had grown as much as it's going to grow. And maybe what they would do when the internet came along, it really started coming along in the mid 90s. Maybe they put their catalogs online. Mm-hmm. And that was it.
Yep.
And at the same time, IBM thought they were selling hardware. If Sears and IBM had gotten together and broken down their two silos, they would have realized that the future of retailing was not about the hardware, it was about the data, and it was about selling something you don't own.
Right.
You didn't have to own the inventory,
right,
to sell it.
Right.
And that was disruptive to Sears because they thought I had to have it all in inventory somewhere.
Right.
At a part number, and they would track it down in some stupid warehouse in Timbuktu. And IBM thought it was all, but the fact is, Amazon came along. Amazon was not an invention.
No, it was not.
It was just a new business model. And even when it first came along, people thought it was a bookstore.
Right.
And no one got it. And that's where 8 Rivers started changing. We realized that we're not in the invention business any more than Amazon is in the invention business. We happen to have an invention, and I have this up next to my monitor here. I have this little purple Lego taped to my monitor. And that is my Lego to represent net power, or that Allen Fetbit cycle.
Yep.
That's the only purple Lego we will ever have. Every other Lego has to be red, yellow, green, blue.
Yeah, that makes pretty much sense.
And we're going to sell something other people have. And yes, and we will put it the same way. Lego can go sell a bunch of red, yellow, green, blue Legos and they look like an animal.
Mm-hmm.
They get a premium for those Legos by
Right.
putting them together to look like something else. It's a kit.
Okay.
So that's how Eight Rivers changed its approach. So at this point, we've got our purple Lego Net Power. We've got our red, yellow, green, blue Legos in Eight Rivers Hydrogen. We've got direct air capture Legos. We've got post-combustion carbon capture Legos. We've got ammonia production Legos. We got steam generating Legos. We got all these Legos, and we're out there to solve people's problems, because here's the real problem. It's what Amazon had to solve for.
Right.
The real problem is, according to Morgan Stanley, the world has to spend $50 trillion to get to net zero by 2050. According to the IEA, it has to spend $100 trillion. Well, those two numbers mean that every day for 30 years, we have to spend somewhere between $5 and $10 billion a day.
Right.
$5 and $10 billion a day. There is no business, there's no manufacturing business on the earth that's going to manufacture $5 to $10 billion worth of equipment a day. There is no sales company that's going to go sell that much stuff every day. There's no, it all has to be more like banking. It is all about, here are the plans to the Legos. We'll give you some services around your Legos, but we want to have other people go build the Legos as much as possible and assemble them.
Absolutely. And that model works across a lot of different systems. It's not just unique to just energy. It works everywhere. If you think that model, as opposed to thinking, oh, I've got to have this, or I've got to do this myself. If you've got the idea and you can formulate it in a way that people understand it, you can sell it or help other people go do it. And you help them shape the future of those things.
Well, actually, and keep in mind, we have structural impediments to getting to make things cheaper, because what everyone will say, oh, you can't get to clean with today's technology. That's wrong. You can't get to clean with today's business models. So as long as we put utilities in one bucket, in hydrogen companies in another bucket, and other companies in other buckets. I mean, think about it. If I have just a power plant is only going to be on about 60 to 70% of the time.
Right.
What if I can use that expensive collection of nuts and bolts also to produce hydrogen for the other 30 to 40% of the time? Well, all of a sudden my costs of both hydrogen and power go down. And because I'm using one set of assets to produce both products, rather than one asset, one silo, then I have to idle the thing. So in effect, it's everything we're doing is about cogeneration. We've always known that cogeneration was going to be effective. But we thought the world, when you say cogeneration to anyone, they think it's about power and steam. And the problem is steam is not transportable. But if it's about power and hydrogen, hydrogen's transportable. If it's about power and ammonia, ammonia is transportable. So we're looking to use, it's the business model that allows the assets to be used more efficiently that we got to do.
That's truly amazing, Bill. It really is everything you just said. And I think that people who are listening to this, as you're thinking about starting your own business or thinking about doing something innovative, you don't have to create it yourself. You can use a model that exists and flow on that model. The other side of that is to be willing to change or rethink. You don't always have all the answers at the start. You have to be willing to rethink or renegotiate what you believe or what you think your philosophy is. So those are pretty powerful things, and that's really wonderful. So I have to ask, so why 8 rivers versus 9 rivers, or why rivers versus horses? How did you come up with that?
Well, everyone has, in this day and age, people have names that they want to give things, and they Black Rock or Black Stone or Pantera or all sorts of things. They try to come up with these names, and they have meaning. That each one of them come along with strength. Or for us, Eight Rivers has two pieces to it. And by the way, there is an Eight Rivers in the world. It's called Ochos Rios in Jamaica, but we didn't name it for Jamaica Eight Rivers. I learned on Wall Street with a bunch of Asian clients that eight was a really lucky number in Asia. I mean, so much so that some of my clients, and an unlucky number is 4, right? And I had one client, if this person called in and asked for a price and they wanted to do a trade, if the price had a number 4 in it, they would want me to change it. And I thought, isn't this nuts that someone would want to change a price against themselves if it had a 4 in it? So, well, that's powerful. And then sometimes, or if it was close to an 8, could you change it from a 9 to an 8 if you were selling it, or if you're buying? You know, I bought it at 7, I'm willing to pay you at 8. So this avoidance, I mean, the power of these numbers was really amazing. And in Hong Kong, a license plate with 8 8s on it goes for millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, and I like the fact that 8 visually is infinity on the side.
Absolutely.
Then there's the rivers part. Water is one of the most powerful things in the world, and it is so unnoticeable so often. You know, it rains, water will form a puddle, it'll roll off of something. You don't think when you look out in your yard or look out in the desert, well, which way is the water going to roll? But after the water doesn't care whether it goes forward, backwards, left, or right.
It just wants to move.
It wants to move. And after a while, you'll have the Grand Canyon. And so my personal motto is be the water.
Be the water. That's beautiful. So let me tell you my water story. So back in 2013, I did Duke Leadership Academy, which is a year-long thing to how to be a great manager, and how to understand all the pieces and parts of how to run a university. And when it was over, I wrote this thing. I was chosen to give the end of the class talk, and I wrote this thing called "The Rock in the Water," and I am always the rock. And although I may be this fixed shape, water rushes over me every day and reshapes me every day. So I am always the rock in the water. So when I finished doing my talk, President Broadhead walked over to me and he gave me a hug and he said, "Rochelle, we're so proud of you for doing this." He says, "May I borrow that?" And so he has used, well, he was still president. I don't know what he does anymore. He had used my thing I had written several times because he said it was such a powerful thing. And I didn't think about it in a way for it to be powerful. I was just thinking about how this training had reshaped me from my earlier beliefs and some of the things. And then I'm constantly being reshaped as I encounter new people. Because one of the most impressive things that President Broadhead ever said to me, he says, "We are sum total of all the people that we meet." And when he first said that to me, it must have been dense because it didn't register me. Because like, what does that mean? But after I got home and got to think about it a little bit, every person that you encounter touches you in one way or the other. They leave a little bit of you. And it's sort of like water. Water is always changing. So it can wash away communities. It can put out fires. It can do all sorts of things. And there's nothing more powerful than water. Because you would think a rock, this mineral, this hard thing, can be changed by water washing over every single day. Yeah. It's pretty powerful. So it's a great name for your company. I think that's amazing. I don't get the 8 thing, but I do get the rivers thing. So that's a great thing. Bill, I think that there's so much more I could ask you and talk to you about, but I think I've taken up enough of your time. But I think you left some pretty important points for people to take away from this. And I think even from your choosing of your education to your choices of careers, and even to now 8 Rivers. And I know 8 Rivers is tremendously successful. You're doing very big things. And I still think that your initial thing that you said to me, although you don't remember, if you see a problem somewhere where you are and you see it regularly enough, try to fix it. And that's the Bill, but that was your advice to me. And I always hold on to that. That really means everything to me. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. I hope you will come back and chat with me again when you have time, because I know how busy you are, but I hope that you will.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for being so meaningful and so impactful on everyone you meet.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. But, I think it's people like you who leave a little bit of advice with me as you go along that helps me become the person I am. So thank you. And I hope that you remain Bill Brown forever and ever, because it's such a remarkable human being. And I'm so glad that I can count you as a friend. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you, Rochelle. Take care now.
I'm going to send you a link to this. Once it converts, please watch it and let me know if I can upload it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.